The Lion Who Stole My Arm. We're up to chapter 6. The tracks where Maury Pellamby had been killed by the lion had been trampled away by human feet, and beyond the little marsh they found some clear prints in the soft ground. Pedru touched one of the paw prints with his fingers. His lion had stood right here in this space where Pedru himself now stood. Only a few short hours separated them. "I'm coming," Pedru whispered in his head to the lion. "I'm coming to get you." The plan was to track the lion, then use the dead goat they had brought with them as bait to tempt the lion to come within range of their spears as they lay in wait. They followed the tracks through tall grasses and under acacia trees all day, then camped out, taking turns to keep watch in the darkness, and set off again at dawn. Early on the second day, they found tracks dug deep in the mud at the end of the pond. The tracks led up away from the band of acacia trees onto a long slope littered with rocks. The ground was too hard here to take an imprint of the paw, but Issa, that's Pedru's father, had found other little signs: a tiny wisp of fur caught on a spider's web, a sharp smell of cat when he put his nose close to a rock. Then, late in the morning, it rained, a downpour like buckets being tipped one after another from the purple clouds. It didn't last, but it was enough to wash away every trace of the lion's journey. "We'll lay a scent trail with the bait from the place where I found the last good track, the top of this ridge," Issa said to Pedru. "You stay here. It's better if there's as little human scent as possible." The dead goat had gotten smelly. Pedru watched Issa let the stinky liquid trickle over the rocks as he dragged the dead animal down the slope, through the first bit of scrubby woodland, and back to the foot of the tree. "We'll climb up in the tree now and wait," said Issa. Pedru looked up to where the trunk divided into smooth gray branches, high enough to keep them safe, but not too high for their spears to hit the lion down below. With 2 arms, Pedru could have climbed up there in moments. Now, Issa would have to haul him up on a rope. Issa would not complain, but Pedru's heart stung. It took some time to get the rope around one of the branches, then around Pedru's waist. But once Pedru was in the tree, he felt more useful. Issa tied the rest of their gear to a rope, and Pedru hauled it up, pulling with his left arm and looping the slack with his stump. Here's a picture of them getting Pedru up into the tree. So the father's got one end of the rope, and then Pedru's got the other end around his waist, and it goes up over a branch so he can kind of like climb as his father pulls him up. Pretty clever. Okay. Then Issa spread as much of the goat scent around as possible and staked the goat firmly in the ground so that the lion just couldn't grab the goat and run before they had a chance to throw their spears. The preparations took all afternoon, and the sun was sinking as Issa pulled himself up into the fork of the tree beside Pedru. "Now," Issa said, "we wait." Pedru drew the shadows growing long across the clearing in his exercise book. But soon the darkness spread and enveloped him. As he sat in silence beside his father, Pedru had to admit that inside the excitement and the pride he felt all day was fear. Chapter 7. Every insect in Africa seemed to be crawling all over Pedru's skin, especially on his left arm where he couldn't squish them. He knew he had to sit as still and quiet as father, but it was very hard. Pedru had never known before how long the night was when you stayed awake for all of it. By the time the crescent moon had floated halfway up the sky, he felt as though he'd been awake for 100 years. A tiny scratching sound came from higher up in the tree. Very slowly, Pedru tilted his head to look up, and he saw 2 bush babies. And it tells us that bush babies are nocturnal, so they sleep during the day and are up at night. Squirrel-sized, relative They're a squirrel size relative of a monkey. They have huge eyes and ears and long back legs for leaping. Bush baby. Okay. They were silhouetted against the sky, so that means you can only see their outline. They leaped along the branch together, holding up their arms as if celebrating each jump. Pedro forgot all about the insects tormenting him. Issa's elbow nudged him in the ribs, and he looked down. Moonlight streaked the space beneath their tree, with the dead goat, a dark stain at the center. Something was creeping toward it, down the slope from the rocks above. A pale shape in the moonlight, a creature that seems to be made of liquid, flowed between the trees and the bushes, disappearing and appearing. Finally, it stood still, and its eyes glowed as they reflected in the moonlight. Lion's eyes. Pedro's skin pricked, and he spoke in his head to the lion to make himself feel brave. Come closer. Come to my spear. If Issa and Pedro had been still before, now they sat like stones, hardly breathing. Their eyes reached into the black and white world of the moonlight, out to where the lion stood at the edge of the clearing. Its glowing eyes scanned the night so that father and son wished themselves sunk into the smooth bark of the tree. Above Pedro's head, the bush babies broke into a family squabble. They squeaked and chittered and rustled the leaves with their wild jumping. Pedro sensed the tension in his father's body draw even tighter as the lion stirred and then turned its face toward the tree. Pedro felt the attention of its eyes, its ears, its nose, and even its whiskers searching the air between them. Bush babies, the lion concluded, just bush babies. Reassured now, the lion moved, but with swift and decisive moves into the dark patch that was the goat, and it began to tear at it with its mouth and paws. Pedro's left hand tightened on his spear, and he knew without looking that his father's right hand had done the same. But still, they waited. And here's a picture of them up in the tree. And there's the lion below them. The lion found that he couldn't carry off the goat. It was stuck somehow, he found. But now the lion was too hungry and too irritated to be suspicious, and it pulled at the bait again, ripping off bits of flesh, no longer noticing the bush babies rustling in the trees above. Pedro saw the spear in the lion's side before he even knew that his father had thrown it. It stuck out, firmly lodged between the ribs. The lion staggered and snarled, a sound that ripped a hole in the stillness. Pedro aimed and threw his spear with all his strength. He almost seemed to feel the spear strike home, piercing the lion's other side. Darkness flowed from the bright coat, as if the night itself were bleeding. The lion fell, crawled a little away, and then lay still. Pedro stared at his spear. My spear, he said to himself, thrown with my left hand. I have killed the lion who stole my arm. But when they climbed down to look at the lion's body, Pedro's feeling of triumph leaked away a little. Was this his lion? He could not be sure, and without certainty he could not feel triumphant. This lion was a female, a lioness, without the scrappy start of a mane that he remembered on his lion. And he was pretty sure that his lion had not had anything around its neck. The sad dead body at its feet. This lion was wearing a collar. So this is sad. They hunted the lion and killed it. And it turns out this lion has a collar and is a female. But, I mean, for them, they have to survive. They're fighting against, the lions for their own safety. So it's not as if they're just hunting it for fun. Okay. Now it gets really good. We'll read one more chapter. Chapter 8. Pedru fetched help from the village, and at dusk on the 4th day, Issa and 3 other men carried the lioness into the space between the huts. Everyone came out to look at the body, but some didn't want to get close, as if they feared the animal could come back to life. Children and women touched the fur with one finger. Some giggled nervously. Some snatched their hands away. The men pushed back the lioness's lips to look at its huge, stabbing teeth. Mama Lago hit the body with a stick and then ran back to her hut crying. But the thing that made everyone talk and ask questions more than the beast's teeth or claws or size was its collar. It was a thick leather collar with a kind of plastic capsule attached to it, and a message was written on it in worn letters. And the message said, "Please return this radio collar to the Lion Research Unit at Madoon." So it's in all caps down here. Please return this radio collar to the research unit at Madoon. Issa explained that the collar had been put on the lion by some foreigners who lived in a compound outside Madoon. Compound is sort of like a camping site or something where there's more than one houses or like sleeping areas together. The capsule on the collar sent out a signal like the radio station that sent the news and the soccer matches to the crackly old radio in Mr. Masungu's hut, and the foreigners could use that signal to tell them what the lion was doing. But this explanation just made people ask even more questions. If they could tell where the lions were, why didn't they just kill them? If they could tell what the lions were doing, why didn't they keep them from doing bad things? Mr. Masungi held up his hand for quiet. I also have heard that the foreigners will sometimes help those who bring back the lion collars. They have powerful medicines and a big Land Rover that can take people to the hospital if they are sick. I think it would be a good thing for someone from this village to take back the collar. I'll do it, Pedru said right away. I'll go tomorrow. Perhaps the lion people would tell him for sure if the lioness they had speared was his lion or not. All right, so now it's the next day, and he's going to go to the lion compound. It's called Madoon Carnivorous Research Station. Oh, sorry, carnivore. I was reading backwards. Carnivore. Okay. The Lions People's compound was a long ride out to Madoon. Pedru was glad to get off his father's bike and lean it against the sign that said Madoon Carnivore Research Station. There were 2 thatched huts and several tents. A battered-looking Land Rover was parked under a tree, and a white man with a bushy beard and a woman with dark hair tied in an untidy bun were peering into the engine under the lifted hood. A tall young man, looking a bit like an older version of Pedru himself, sat in the shade with a laptop computer glowing on his knees. None of them noticed Pedru. Mr. Masinki and his father had told Pedru that the lion people would be pleased to get this collar. But now that he was here, seeing the huts and the tents, the car and the computer, all devoted to finding out about lions, Pedru wondered how they might feel about a dead lion. For a moment, he thought about leaving the collar and just running off. But then he might never know if he had speared his lion. He decided to be brave. He stepped in front of the young man with the laptop. Hello, I'm Pedru, he said, and I have a collar for you. The young man said his name was Ronaldo, and his 2 workmates were Beth and John. Beth was from Cape Town. Cape Town is a town in Africa. And John was from New York in America. They were sad that the lion was dead, they did say, but they were very pleased that Pedro had brought them the collar. They thanked him several times. They made him sit in the shade. They brought him a drink of water and some cookies. They were very kind to him. The lion was speared near my village, Pedro explained cautiously. It killed a man named Mr. Mori Pelembi. I saw it running away. The 3 lion researchers nodded sadly. But what I would like to know, Pedro went on, holding up his stump, is if it is the same lion who stole my arm. The 3 researchers looked at Pedro's missing right arm as if they were noticing it for the first time. For a moment, everyone was quiet. And then John said, well, this collar might just be able to answer your question. Okay. So we'll have to find out more. It's getting exciting. Okay, I hope you guys are enjoying the story. I'll read again soon.